Hello nerds! Thank you for watching Generally Nerdy. This is the Week in Nerdom, your place for nerd news video updates every day of the week. Today being Monday, we are talking music, and we actually have a pretty decent sized music episode. Greta Van Fleet, Nino, Ozzy Osbourne, Devildriver, all kinds of fun stuff in music, so let's hit up the intro real quick so we can talk about it. First thing coming out the gate, we're starting with the softer stuff, and then we're going to move into the heavier stuff pretty immediately. First thing, though, is Greta Van Fleet. This is a band I was only aware of by name until they were on Saturday Night Live, but I saw an interview that they did with Rolling Stone, where the lead singer, and let me read the quote directly so I'm not misquoting him. The lead singer says, referring to the Led Zeppelin comparisons, the lead singer says, "Obviously, we hear the similarity. That's one of the influences of ours. But at this point, it's like, okay, we've acknowledged that. Let's move on." So they're aware they look like crazy hippies from the 70s, and they want people to stop calling them out for looking like crazy hippies from the 70s, while they're still making music like crazy hippies from the 70s. Like, I like Zapp, but we're going to talk about Greta Van Fleet's music in the reviews section, because we're going to review one of the performances that they did on SNL this past weekend. So we'll table that one for later. Next in music, like I said, we're jumping right into the heavy stuff after the Greta Van Fleet. We're talking Devildriver and Dez Fafara, I'm pretty sure. That's how it's spelled, though I've heard it pronounced all kinds of funny ways. Dez and company, I just apparently can't sit still. They gave us the Outlaws Till the End record last year, which was kind of a mixed bag. Most of it was good. There were definitely some misses and some unexpected misses on that record, like the Hank 3 song that they covered with Hank 3 just sounded off, but we talked about that already. Now they're back in the studio. They're according to Dez, he believes that musical artists should put out a record every year these days, because of the nature of the music industry, because of technology being what it is, because of the pace in which society moves. All of these factors to Dez means we have to do a record a year, and they're coming through with it, because Dez is in the vocal studio right now recording the official follow-up to 2016's Trust No One, because you can't really count a covers album as a proper follow-up because it's not original music. Though, in that case, an argument could be made. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're getting fresh, brand new music from Devildriver by the end of the year. It sounds like that's their goal. So I'm down. I dig Devildriver. They're not the best example of the new wave of American heavy metal, but they are a pretty good one. So, yes, please, more. Thank you. Next on the news list, we have another one that we're going to talk about for a second and then table till later, because it's Nino. Nino just released a song last week, only it was missing their vocalist and both the guitar players. They got 2 new guitarists and a new vocalist, and released a song called Sangre. We're going to talk about that song in the reviews. But then a couple of days later, the original vocalist and guitar players released a statement saying they haven't left the band, and now there's this big legal fight in who gets to use the name El Nino. I tried, but I could not find any reason as to why the separation, why their mommy and daddy are fighting, but that's the way it is, and it's kind of funny because I thought El Nino broke up a few years ago. So, yeah. And then our last bit of news this week has to do with Ozzy Osbourne. This year apparently marks the 37th anniversary of when he bit the head off of the bat that one time. And so he went to Twitter and was talking about it, and now on his online store, you can find through his website, they're selling to commemorate the 37th year. Like, that seems like a very oddly specific number. Like, 40 years I could understand, but maybe Sharon's worried that they won't make it to 40 years before he finally kicks it. 35 would have been made slightly more sense because, you know, psychologically 5s and 10s just kind of work better, right? Or 7 years ago at the 30th anniversary. 37 is just a strange number. I don't know why 37 is significant, but it's the 37th anniversary, and you can buy on the website, sorry, I buried the lead. You can buy a plush bat doll with a detachable head from his online store as a commemoration, I guess, of the event. I think that even took place in Texas, much like him pissing on the Alamo, which is also a hilarious story. But yeah, so if you want to help Ozzy remember biting the head off of a live bat on stage 37 years ago, then take to his website and just laugh your way to spending $40 freaking on what basically amounts to a Beanie Baby with a removable head. I think Ozzy did a lot for the genre, even though I'm not a huge fan of his music, but I just can't get behind this. This is too goofy. But that's the end of news this week, guys. Let's jump into reviews, and like I said, we're going to be doing 3 reviews for music this week. We got the Greta Van Fleet SNL performances. We've got Mark Morton and Chester Bennington. I believe we talked about this once before, but we're going to review the song since that's the first single Morton is releasing off of his solo album. And then we're also going to be talking the new El Nino Sangre song. So let's hit up the reviews. Before we jump into the reviews this week, guys, let me remind you about the Patreon. Patreon.com/generallynerdy for more content, monthly discords, contributor and producer credits, and much more depending on the tier to which you subscribe. Again, Patreon.com/generallynerdy because I'm too poor and don't have a staff to do a paywall myself. Patreon.com/generallynerdy. And now let's review some stuff. Alright, jumping into reviews. First things first, I want to do the Mark Morton tune with Chester Bennington on vocals. I had fairly high expectations for this. I'm not gonna lie, I came into this expecting perfection because I am such a fan of Mark Morton's work in Lamb of God. I actually am a bit of a fan of the early Linkin Park stuff that Chester did. First record, their Hybrid Theory record, or not, the record they did before Hybrid Theory when they were calling themselves Hybrid Theory and not Linkin Park. There's some really interesting stuff on there. It's a lot more hip-hop oriented that way, though. The Hybrid Theory record was a lot more nu metal, and we got to see a different side of Chester than basically any other record since. So this sounded like it was going to be a return to form for Chester, and I feel like that part of my expectations was wholly met. Chester going back to a more metal sound with his vocal delivery, yes, absolutely, though Chester's idea of a metal sound is not most people's idea for metal. Just very radio friendly. Let's put it that. Even at its rawest, even at the second bridge, the breakdown towards the end of the song, right before they go to the outro, even that heavier section just comes across as, yeah, this is something that I could hear on my top 40 hard rock station, or active rock, I guess is what they're calling it these days. So, like, that kind of didn't sit super well with me. And, again, Mark being part of one of the best metal bands to come from the States in the last, like, 2 decades, the simplicity of this, the basicness of this song really let me down. Like, I feel so sad that this song wasn't more than it actually is. Structure-wise, we got ABA. It's a ABABC kind of structure. Like, even the main riff, while it sounds like a Mark Morton riff, it more sounds like somebody doing a very good imitation of Mark Morton, but not exactly. Like, I don't know if it's because it's so overly produced, you don't get as much dynamic, or if it's just the way Mark is playing the song. I don't know where the disconnect is happening, but it just doesn't feel like what you would expect from Mark Morton. So there's just a lot here that I really had high expectations for and really could have been great, but falls pretty flat. So let's get into the scores real quick so I can kind of elaborate a little more specifically. General score on this one, I really wanted to give it an 80. But just the super safe, digestible kind of sound, I couldn't give it an 80, so we're going 78 out of 100 for the general score. And again, this is the more technical side of the scale, so we're talking production value, we're talking the overall performance of the musicians and the vocalist, and just generally speaking, it was too shiny and polished for me to really stand behind it. So 78 again out of 100. Next, we're talking genre, and this, I found it to be pretty interesting, again, in that Mark is coming from a more traditional kind of metal background, and Chester from the nu metal and even pop kind of background. So the combination of those, you're sacrificing a lot of the credibility coming from the metal side, whereas you're kind of increasing the credibility from the other side by doing so. So the meeting in the middle is listenable. I'm not calling this a bad song necessarily. It's just kind of disappointing. So for the genre, because it is an interesting connection between those two different worlds, we're going 80 out of 100. And for the writing side of this, again, structure-wise, we're talking lyrically, even just anything written for the piece. I'm not gonna bury this one too much. 70 out of 100. The super simple structure was a little disappointing. The lyrics being relatively stereotypical was pretty disappointing. So again, we're going 70 out of 100 for the writing. And then we're talking enjoyability. And the enjoyability was, in spite of its flaws, in spite of the letdown expectations, it's still pretty enjoyable. Like, if you can look past Chester's past, if you can look past the music Chester did for a long time, really, that just wasn't what a lot of his fan base wanted, and you can just take this as a song for what it is, it's really not horrible, but it's not great either. So we're looking at an 82 out of 100, just because it was a little bit into the B range, but not quite A material. So an okay outing for Mark's first solo single. This whole record, though, there's some really interesting guest spots on there, so I'm really interested to listen to the rest of it. And we very well could talk about another track or two right here in reviews, but that's it for this one. We're going to move next into Greta Van Fleet. And as always, links to all of the songs are down in the description, so you can go listen to them. This one is a little bit more specific. I actually added to the rubric for Greta Van Fleet because this is a live performance, so it should be graded on different merits. And so, again, I created a new rubric. Still general, but this time we have performance. So the actual movement on stage and the finger work and all that jazz. So the actual performance of the song and then the quality of the song. Those are going to be the two middle ground rubrics. And then, again, obviously general and enjoyability. But first, let's talk about the actual performance. A lot of people like this band. A lot of people watched this performance because it's strangely SNL is still getting decent ratings, I believe. I haven't actually looked at the ratings for them for a little while, but they're still on the air and people are still talking about it, so must be getting enough. But again, I had never actually heard any of Greta Van Fleet's music before this performance, so I'm coming at this with virgin ears. I had no expectations based on the record itself. I had no expectations based on any sort of history with this band because this was absolutely fresh. And first off, they are still a pretty young band, though that's not a huge... there's not a whole lot of room of leeway I can give them because Zeppelin was a young band pretty much when they first started being Zeppelin, and that's obviously the kind of thing they're trying to ape here, and it's just not gelling. There's a whole lot missing in this equation. Not the least of which is it seems that the vocalist has some interesting anxiety issues while he's on stage because his movements are super awkward when they actually happen. Most of the time he's standing relatively still. As far as movement on the front of the stage and everybody in front of the guitar player and the occasional keyboard player, or the drummer and the keyboard player rather, there's a whole lot of I'm stuck in a box kind of movement. They're just like, I can see the guitar player really wants to feel this music and is trying to mimic motions that would imply that he enjoys what he's doing, but you can see that he's mimicking these motions and not as much feeling the emotion that would cause him to move in such a way. And being a performer who moves a lot on stage, being a performer who has knocked my vocalist out with my instrument, I'm very familiar with that feeling of actually feeling the music and enjoying these things you're doing on stage. And then I've also worked with bands in the past who move on stage in such a way as you can see their brain moving and they're telling themselves, this is how a rock star moves on stage, so this is how I should move on stage. There's a very obvious difference between those two things, and that's kind of what I'm getting from this band. So I totally forgot to mention the name of the song that we're doing. The name of the song, because I'm so great at burying the lead, is Black Smoke Rising. Again, I've never heard the album version of the tune, so I don't have a comparison to make there. But there's a lot of in the songwriting of this band. There's a lot of baby baby ooh yeah, come on kind of stuff, and that's kind of a hallmark of Led Zeppelin. So again, I don't understand why they're so vehemently trying to separate themselves from the Zeppelin comparisons. Even though you acknowledge that it's there, that's not to say that it's not there anymore, so people are going to stop making that comparison. Whatever. Let's get to the scores real quick, and so we can move on. General score, we're talking execution, we're talking just the nimbleness of the fingers and whatnot, the precision of the drummer, all of that jazz. Looking at about a 70 out of 100 for this, because the one member in this band who you really get that feeling of, he is enjoying what he's doing and he's losing himself in the music, is the drummer. The other guys are putting way too much thought into what they're doing, and it's not natural. It doesn't feel like it's just they emanate this music. They have to do this or they're going to explode. That's not the feeling you get. So 70 out of 100 for the general score because of that. Next, we're talking specifically the performance of this song. And again, to restate what I said a moment ago, there's a lot of stuck in a box kind of mentality with these guys on stage. So we're looking at a 50 out of 100. Then we're talking the song itself, and I actually can reasonably say I didn't hate the song. It's definitely one that the guys in Zeppelin would have thrown away, but that's not to say that it's a horrible song. It's not a great song by any stretch. So because it's not completely offensive, because there's no hard erroneous issue with this, then we're going 75 out of 100 for the actual song itself. And then on enjoyability, we're talking the song being listenable does not redeem the lack of enthusiasm. It does not redeem the general copy-paste feeling about this performance. So we're going 60 out of 100 for enjoyability, which is not a great score. Like, I feel bad sometimes giving things bad scores, but if it's bad, I can't sugarcoat it. That doesn't do anybody any good. So yeah, we're gonna just move on to the last review, which is the new El Nino song, Sangre. The new guitarists and the new vocalist definitely are right at home with the nu metal sound that El Nino has created for themselves. This isn't far and away anything different from the El Nino I knew before, so that is kind of working in its favor. The rhythm section, who is the existing members, the previous members, I guess, is super tight. You get a really good groove in quite a few sections of the song. Actually, the verse and one of the the breakdown bridge, super tight groove. They find the pocket pretty nicely. When the song mellows out is kind of where it starts to fall apart, is kind of where the cracks start to show. Vocalist, nothing special about this guy. He sounds like every other generic nu metal vocalist, except for sometimes he sings in Spanish, which happens with the other El Nino vocalist. So again, nothing really sets this guy apart. And when he's more on a melodic side rather than the harsh side, rather than the screaming side, there's very little vocal variance. There's very little dynamics coming from this vocalist, so that kind of killed it for me. And the guitar work, while it is nu metal and while it is very solid in that subgenre, it is also a great example of just there's nothing to write home about here. Again, in that breakdown bridge, I really dug that guitar work, but it's just chugging. It's an interesting groove, and that's what makes that work. The guitar work actually accents the rhythm section, which some would argue is kind of the point to a certain extent, depending on the emotion you're trying to evoke from your listener. But still, not a horrible tune, but super generic nu metal, and I'm a fan of a genre. I like the generic bits too, so I can dig this song. But I'm not gonna make any sort of claim that it's a great song, because it's definitely not. So let's get into the scores real quick. general score, because this is cookie cutter, this is nu metal by numbers, nothing sets this apart. We're looking at a 60 out of 100. They're even aping Soulfly, the groove that I really dig in this song. I feel like Soulfly's done it and done it better. So they're not setting themselves apart with any element of this tune. As far as where this sits in the genre, it's somewhere towards the top end of the generic pile. So we're gonna go 75 out of 100 because, again, it is nu metal. It knows what it is and it's embracing that, but in a paint by numbers kind of way. So a solid middle of the road C. That works. The writing, so we're talking arrangement, we're talking the guitar riffs, things like that. This is not where this shines at all. So again, we're going 60 out of 100 for the writing. Super generic riffs. We got rather generic vocal lyrics again. The only thing that is really anything even approaching great is the rhythm section, and I'm just going to keep beating that one until you understand. If you like a good rhythm section, then Il Nino is probably a band you'll enjoy if you listen to the nu metals. And then enjoyability, again, I like generic bands inside of genres that I'm into, and nu metal is a genre that I am into. So that kind of gave it a little bit of a boost. We're looking at a 73 out of 100. There's not a whole lot of other stuff about this that's like, yes, you absolutely must go listen to it. Unless you're like me and you can listen to a generic band in a genre you enjoy and recognize it as a generic band but still enjoy that genericness, this is probably not the band for you. If you're looking for a stellar example of a subgenre, this is definitely not the band for you. But if you're okay with the mediocrity, which in music, even though in other forms of entertainment I'm not, but in music I'm cool with it. 73 out of 100. I couldn't give it those extra 2 points. I feel like it was a stretch to give it the 73. So, and that is the end of this week's update, guys. What did I miss? What should we talk about next week? I have recently started managing a hip hop group, so I feel like I should probably start talking a little bit more about that. So, in the future, we're probably going to get both of those two sides of the music industry, because I'm involved with those two sides of the music industry now. So that's what we're going to be kind of moving forward into. So if you have any suggestions for anything, any newer hip-hop stuff that we should talk about in news or even in reviews, then let's talk about that in the comments. You can email me. All of that information is up on the website, generallynerdy.net. Info@generallynerdy.net or Dustin@generallynerdy.net. Either one will get to me directly. So let me know. Again, I have a big issue with modern hip-hop, so I feel like any of the reviews we're going to do until I start getting suggestions are probably going to be a decade old. But I don't know, Kendrick Lamar's still putting out stuff. I can listen to him, and Eminem still puts out stuff. I like him. So there's things that will be fair game as soon as they start happening again, but right now there's not a whole lot happening. But we're signing off, so generallynerdy.net is the website. That's where you can go get all of the freebies. You can find the nerdy stores, so you can go get your nerdy swag. There's a general store icon across the top of the website. Go check that out, generallynerdy.net. If this is your first time here at Generally Nerdy, then definitely click the subscribe button or follow me, depending on which platform you are watching. If you like this episode, then click the like button. If you didn't like the episode, then you can totally click the dislike button, whichever. I'm not mad at you either way. If you're falling behind, though, on your nerd news and you want to catch up, then you can click or tap that box right there to the left of my face to do that. But before we do that and do all the things and the emails and the stuff, guys, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.